Yeah. Afternoon. Uh, that's normally not the pattern which I'm very familiar with, talking to empty chairs, but Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. But I think when there's so many interesting sessions which are going around, it becomes very difficult to pick which one to attend, which one not to attend. The topic which we all heard, modulating behaviors for better security, really an abstract topic, but very relevant today. Because when you start looking at, there's so much discussion which goes around on security, but eventually, if you start analyzing, it is the behavior which all of us demonstrate, which really makes it effective or not effective. Having a very interesting panel which we have today, because we got someone who represents a bank and we got someone who represents a gaming industry, two again completely different dimensions, and someone like me who brings in understanding of cyber and I think can correlate much better with what really goes with the human psyche. So I just wanted to start with some examples, and the examples are always easier to understand. I've been a Yahoo mailer since my college days, and that account is, it's more emotional connect to that account. You don't want to run away while you have a Gmail and so on and so forth. And when that news came out, Yahoo did get breached, and this breach happened in 2014, or that's what media reports. And then immediately an alert came. It said you should be changing your password. I don't know, the first thought which came to me, oh, is anyone going to attack me? Should I be changing the password? And this is happening to me, someone who goes out and talks so much of cybersecurity. But I was reflecting back, saying that, isn't that the behavior which all of us demonstrate? And I think when I start reflecting back on our country, great country where we come in from, all of us, our neighbors know more than what our family knows. It's changing now with WhatsApp coming, but that's the culture in which we are, and that's the kind of a behavior. We're very open, we are very transparent, we tend to believe very easily, and some of these things we don't believe in security and privacy, so everything is known to the neighbors and so on and so forth. So when it comes on to security elements, I've been going out working with enterprises extensively, and when I say that, oh, best practice says password should be changed after 45 days, I get really bad stares. And what happens is, people say, okay, if you want my password to be changed, I'll add a 1 after the password. That's the way. Then and add a 2 behind the password. That's how the password keeps on changing. And in a sense, the password has not changed. If you really look at the human behavior, again, which we're trying to bring upon, they are not very keen to change. Interestingly, what we did as a global firm, we did this study. This was a study very focused on US, and we did it by industry. And whenever cyber gets talked and US gets talked, a case study which is target case study has to be brought upon, and that's where we also started. So we said, let's go to retail industry and try understanding from an outside-in perspective, saying that if you are a buyer or if you are a customer to Target, and you got to know that Target had a data breach and the credit card data or information went out, how does it impact your shopping pattern with Target? And for any guesses, what would the response be? We have fairly thin population. You will not shop with Target next time, okay? Anyone else wants to take a guess? So only 10% people aligned with you. 90% people said they'll continue to go to Target. And you start looking at it, start looking at that data point and say that, why are they going to Target? Are they going to Target because they have a trust in that brand? Because the brand is able to fulfill their needs? And because the management has now stood up and said that they will make sure adequate measures are put in place, so that you as a customer will not be impacted, and that's what people trust upon. Exactly the same study was conducted across for automotive industry, and this was more of a hypothetical question, and there was a difference which we got upon. We said that you go out, buy an automobile, and you are told this company got hacked. Would you be interested in buying that branded vehicle at this point of time? The answer was 70% people today said it doesn't matter. The same question to the same person asked, saying that, imagine we are not in 2016, but we are in 2021. What would be your response? And the response just flipped. because everyone expects the connected cars to really come upon at that point of time. So all what I'm trying to bring upon to the perspective is saying that the behavior that we have is not something which is stationary. It's not universal. It's changing. It's transient. And you know, again, what the study shows is that it depends also on the age group. The millennials have a very, very different way to look upon security versus boomers have a very different way of looking at security. The study again brought upon, and it's contextual to India, that's the reason I'm bringing it out, using mobile apps for payment. If you get to know you were using a mobile app and that organization got hacked, there's some things which are being talked upon in the country at this moment, where there's a claim being made upon some big payment systems being hacked upon. But if that was to happen, and the company comes back saying that we have fixed everything, how many people will move? And the response was that 37% of the boomers would move. The millennials would not move. The behavior is again changing over there. And that's where human behavior becomes so important, to make sure that the security that we drive, whether inside the enterprise or outside in the environment which we operate upon, we need to bring that context in to make it so much factual and so much accurate. With that, let me hand over to our representative who's here from the bank. I think everyone is looking forward to hear from you, Manish, at this moment, what HDFC Bank is doing, because it's very contextual given what country is going upon. Everyone looking at digital mode of commerce to work upon. So I saw a long queue in front of the petrol pumps where everyone is taking out their credit cards because you get some discounts now. So there's obviously a spike which is going to come upon in those electronic transactions, be it on the normal electronic channels or on the mobile channels. How you preparing yourselves internally as well as externally? If you can share that perspective, that will be very helpful today.
Would it be all right if I started off with the case study as well?
Oh, absolutely. Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that will be very helpful. Yeah.
Great. So before I get on to this, to answer your question directly, yes, there is not going to be, there already has been a spike. And that spike has been such that everybody who's in the support staff, the supporting teams, have had to spend sleepless nights trying to just absorb the load which has suddenly come in. Partially it was because of the panic that it created, because there's really no need for somebody to keep spending 2,500 rupees every day. So why are those lines still out there? It's because of the uncertainty. But then again, that reflects back on the behavior, the human psyche. So if I were to take a minute and dwell upon what exactly is human behavior, and we talk about it in so many different contexts, but fundamentally, my understanding, you can correct me here, is it's basically response to stimuli. Now that's human reaction. Now when human reaction gets tempered over a period of time, it develops a pattern. If there's a group of people who are believing in that pattern, it becomes a general behavior. There are various terms given to this. Some people like to call it a fad. So the latest fad is what? I mean, everybody knows, take a selfie, right? What's that? That's a behavior. What has it been brought about by? So there is a term which I came to know of recently thanks to my esteemed peer in DACI. He gave me a write-up to read, and that mentioned, it said cyber psychology. And I said, I've heard psychology. What is cyber psychology? So a quick lookup, and you come to know that it is nothing but the social research which is being carried out to understand how do humans behave and react in a connected world out there in the cyberspace. And that has spawned so many fads, beginning with your selfie, or people say that I've got the maximum number of likes, I've got the maximum number of footprints on various social media sites. That's the kind of behavior that we are seeing today. Coming back, when it comes to modulating behavior, can behavior be patched? Is it right to say that I can patch human behavior? Any responses? Can I patch human behavior? I mean, in the IT parlance, we say, I will patch the server to stamp out the vulnerability. But can I patch human behavior? Yes, you're right. It can be patched, but it's not called patching. I mean, the usual software term is modulating. Now, when I say patch human behavior, why do I say that? The purpose is that those of you who are aware and have been in this space, there were 3 realms until the last decade that used to be harped upon in every session that's carried out. That's people, process, and technology, right? A fourth realm has been added recently called data. But the people element, for some strange reason, everybody likes to say they're usually the weakest link in this entire setup. Now, why would they say that? They would probably want to convey a very different message, which is that if the people are aware, if the people know what they're supposed to be doing, not supposed to be doing, in context of their work or as a customer, they would probably react differently. So what we did at the bank is, we are not trying to nudge, so the topic is nudging techniques. I've tried to kind of dovetail whatever we've been doing under these two topics. So to begin with, we have different channels with which we connect with both employees and customers. For what? To create an awareness on the best practices of information security. Why? Because as a bank, the most important thing that is driving my business, my bank's business, is the element of trust which various customers like yourselves place in the bank. Why? Because we are handling your money, correct? The employees have to be aware as to what they need to do to make sure that this customer information is kept secure all the time. So take a look at this. Now, when we say, it says advisories from the CISO's desk and the GMs. So from the CISO's desk is one channel that we have started periodically, and I have my CISO sitting here on the first row, Mr. Samir Ratolikar. So this goes out from his desk periodically, informing people within the bank, the employees, how you need to make your password a little difficult to crack. Now you would wonder, these are employees, they're well within the perimeter of the bank's environment, you've got a firewall, you've got so many other gizmos and sensors which we spend so much of money on. Is this really needed? Yes, it's needed. Because there's this concept of insider threat. I don't know who's disgruntled. I don't know who has not liked the rating given to them in the mid-year review. I don't know who's being leveraged upon by an external entity that, you give me the leads of the last 1 week, which amounts to 10,000, 15,000, I'll pay you X rupees. So this is one. Then we realize that, okay, if there is too much of content, let's add some image. So the image very clearly tells you that this particular CISO's desk message is about wishing. There are enough more and number of calls, each one of you must have received at some point in time. I'm from RBI, I'm from income tax, I'm from ICICI, I'm from HDFC, we are offering you this, we are offering you that, give me your details. So to guard against that, we create awareness through this channel. And the reason why I'm showing you only visuals, because it is scientifically proven the moment I put up text there, your mind will switch off. It's a fact. I mean, all of us have gone through school and college. We know what we used to do when there used to be boring lectures. So the idea is to keep it as visual as possible so that you can absorb most of it. Now, this particular thing is a global mailer, the one which I just showed you. It's a cybersecurity tip, which has been started to make sure and make people aware of the newer terms and the emerging threat vectors. This is another global mailer which goes out. Don't let anybody steal it from you. So you have this bad guy, and he's holding a mask, so he may not be whom he's posing to be. Then there is the traditional e-learning course. Now, we know that there used to be classroom sessions. Then we kind of made it into CBTs, which are computer-based training. The dry version used to be, we used to go sit in front of the computer, learn some stuff, go give an exam with radio buttons, and that's it. This is a very different thing that we've come up with, which is interactive. So you see that lady there, she talks you through the entire course. It covers all the domains which are there, probably in an ISO 27001. And these are some of the stats which I have to show you in terms of what we have been achieving. So there's been totally a 93% compliance within the organization for people who have been covered. Then there is something known as a voice blast. So the reason why we've trying so many channels is to engage, because anything which is repetitive tends to get boring. So this is another channel where there is a voice blast, which means you get a call, and on the other end of the call, you have the voice of our CISO, who gives you a quick 45-second to 1.5 minute input on the best practices or on any one topic. And this has been a huge hit. There are some targeted campaigns which are carried out. So within the bank, geographically sensitive areas where we see emergence of frauds because there has been change in technology or an upgradation, the CISO sends out these kind of targeted mailers to the relationship managers. This one particularly says that for a particular week, we're going to be conducting a series of cybersecurity drills and a series of cybersecurity trainings. And it is urging them to become train the trainer. So we are training the relationship manager, who will again train his team. Then there is the phishing diagnostic. Now, what is phishing diagnostic? We've been hearing about it yesterday, today, that phishing is a term wherein you get targeted. So if it's specifically meant for you, it's targeted spear phishing. Otherwise, it's a general phishing attack. You get an attachment, you get a link, you click on it, and you're finished. But in order to make people aware, sending something from the CISO's desk, sending them a visual is one thing. Putting them through the actual exercise is another. And this is what we do also internally. On a periodic basis, we conduct this. We have a tool. It sends out these spoofy mailers. And we try to see that despite all the efforts that we are doing for creating awareness, how much has actually been absorbed by the employees. This is the most latest, I will say, metric which I can show you. So as you can see, this was a monsoon trip discount offer mail that had gone out to all the employees in the bank. And the red indicates that despite every effort, there's still that 0.3% who will click on the link and will provide the info which is being asked. There are about 10% who will still click on the link or the attachment, but beyond that, they did not go. I have 85% who didn't do anything, which is okay, but then the next step is that why didn't those 85% translate into reporting this matter to us? Why didn't that percolate down back to us? That was also part of the message. So as you see, we have only 4.2% there. That's our learning. That's our area that we have to attack. So like it says, while the users who fell victim, the count has gone down, and the people who are reporting has gone up, it is not as much as we would like to see. So this is an area of work for us, which was one of the outcomes of this particular study that was carried out. Then there is the usual wallpaper that is sent out. There is the newsletter, there's Security Pulse. And we also have a smart game. So as we're discussing with Atul, we have these categories of employees who come in, and we have the categories of customers. So the youngsters who come into the bank, they have a very different way of viewing how security needs to be handled. Now to make it interesting for them, there is a small game that we have introduced, and it's been running for 2 months now. They've been over close to 150 teams which have played it. And so far we started small. We focused only on phishing, wishing, and smishing. And we gave them the basic concepts. You get in, you can be the good guy, you can be the bad guy. It's quite similar to some of the hypnotic bot kind of a game that was shown. It's not so animated, it's more interactive in terms of dialogue. Last slide for you. This will not put you off to sleep, I hope, because it's only text. But this is just to bring out to the fore that in the center, you see all the channels that the bank is using as of today for communicating with both employees as well as the customers. On your right, you have what are the 9 initiatives with respect to employees, and the nudging techniques for customers on the left. Now, if you notice, there is mention of number 5 under employees as motion picture. And there is also a pledge which is part of it. So should I go ahead? Can I move ahead? I'll show you a quick 2-minute clip, and then I'll hand it over back to you. So this is another way, instead of saying thank you, another way of sending a message. Now, when you see this clip has been a part of the induction program, periodically played on the intranet as well. You've got the senior management. It's a top-down approach. So for information security, if you want the employees to listen, they have to see a face of authority. So you have right from the deputy managing director, going down to a group head, going down to a regional head, all the way to the team of the SOC, all taking a pledge. Now, what is this pledge? We all have various quick 10, 15, or 5 commandments every organization has on InfoSec. So the 15 odd commandments which we had, instead of putting it on a mouse pad or sending it as a mailer, we said, let's make a film out of it. People will remember it more.
I pledge to support the creation of a strong information security culture in the bank. I also pledge to guide the information security team in all their endeavors towards making the bank a secure organization and protecting it against cyber threats and information security risks.
I pledge to inculcate information security consciousness across my teams.
I pledge to ensure compliance to the best practices in information security within the bank.
I pledge to enhance information security awareness amongst users.
I pledge to provide world-class information technology security framework for my organization.
I pledge to take a personal responsibility for information security and follow HDFC Bank's security practices.
I pledge to classify and label my documents and handle them accordingly.
I pledge to use the bank's facilities for official purposes only.
I pledge not to access or modify any information which is outside my job role.
I pledge to abide by bank's desktop use policy.
I pledge to keep my desk clean and clear of any confidential information.
I pledge to lock my computer before leaving my desk.
I pledge to use strong passwords and not share my password with anyone.
I pledge to follow strict hygiene while internet surfing and downloading.
I pledge to abide by my organization's security policy and promptly report all security-related incidents to the concerned team.
I pledge not to send official or customer data outside the bank premises.
I pledge not to post personal, private and sensitive information on social networking sites.
I pledge to not abetting any kind of unauthorized access to my organization's network or information.
We pledge to use portable storage devices on approval only.
We pledge to safeguard sensitive data from any inappropriate disclosure.
We pledge to raise awareness to follow good security practices among family, friends and colleagues.
I pledge to provide world-class information security culture in the bank.
Back to you.
That was very effective. Thanks, Manish, for bringing that perspectives. And Sameer, great to have you also over here and see all what you've done in the bank. Just to move the discussion forward, I think it was extremely great to get thoughts when you talked upon how to modulate the behavior and how to nudge rather than making one drastic shift, which obviously is not attainable. Given that you brought in so many perspectives, Manish, I still want to get a particular view from you, which is more outside in. Look, most of us today, in way, would be interacting with you or your bank as a customer, and when we start looking at those interaction channels, while security, all of us really want that security to be there, but to be honest, security also tends to become overhead. When you really want to go ahead with a transaction or you want to process upon anything. How do you think that's a message which comes back into the bank, and specifically looking at the kind of the target population that we have? I brought in this example of millennials versus boomers, and millennials tend to be the ones who will be more keen to not use two-factor authentication, if I was just to take an example, because they can't wait for an OTP to come. If an SMS service is down for whatever reason, an OTP doesn't come, it's like, a bad rating going back to the respective bank. So are there initiatives, are there efforts where the products and the way you're going out to the customers is also changing, because you get to see some of these behaviors today?
Yes, in fact, if I were to cite two specific examples to address that query. Firstly, there is, as you mentioned, there are various channels that people can connect, customers do connect with us. Some of them are disgruntled or they are upset. Why? Because despite all the awareness that we create around a change in a particular feature, say in net banking, for example, they still don't like it. To give you an example, those of you who use net banking of HDFC Bank, there's been a change wherein you have a virtual keyboard, right? The virtual keyboard was static. Of late, every time you click on it, all the keys change their position again. Now that was pretty upsetting for few gentlemen, and they kind of wrote back pretty angry mails, sounding pretty upset on the phone. And initially, while the customer care team tried to pacify them and make them understand with whatever, I will not use the word standard drafts, but yes, they have been given as employees training on information security. In their limited understanding, they tried to pacify the customer. When they don't listen, it kind of goes up the escalation layer, comes to the information security team, where we do a call back to such customers. And we explain to them the whole logic of why it's being done. And I would say 8 out of 10 understand. 2 still refuse to understand. But then that's how it is. So for the 8 who've understood, it's great. And we are looking at the masses. To give you another example, feedback does generally come in from the business teams wherein they say, everybody wants it quick, everybody wants it on the fly. Why do I have to even enter my username and password? Why can't I just get in straight away? So keeping that in mind, they did come up with a solution or a suggestion. It was tested, it was evaluated. And there is a concept of a quick access PIN which has now come in on the mobile banking, whereby you don't have to actually enter username and password anymore. You do that once, you have your security question, and thereafter you set your 4 or 6 digit PIN, and then with one stroke you're in. So usually this is a way that we try to be, but we cannot definitely keep on matching up with all the expectations, because then you have to have the balance between convenience and security.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's a great one. The quick access which you mentioned. I'm sure many more people would be really looking forward to those kind of initiatives, because that really helps upon. One of the other things, Manish, which you talked upon was security gaming, and I did pick upon that. And we got Kinshuk along with us today. Kinshuk, I just want to bring you in over here. You've been doing gamings for very, very long time right now. Can you share your perspective, saying that what really are you seeing, how gaming is becoming effective mode today to communicate a message which, say, in a typical classroom session may not be effectively informed upon? And this may not be just from a security world, this could be from any context. And also, if you could add upon, Kinshuk, how gaming is not only focused on a particular segment. While we all know when Pokemon walks were happening, I also went out for Pokemon walks, but that was with my kid. I wasn't going out on my own. But I just want you to bring in a perspective, saying that how the gaming is changing upon, whereby it's no longer just the kids gaming which is happening today, but it's spanning across the entire age group. So if you can bring that perspective, that will be helpful.
So if you look at a game is basically a series of tasks that the player is supposed to fulfill to achieve certain objectives and get some results. And all of these happen in the context of certain rules that have been established in that game world. So simple example, Mario. I'm sure everyone has seen Mario. So there are rules. You can do certain things, you can't do certain things, and you're chasing through all these worlds to save the princess and taking all these actions. Now, this was fun, and people would do this for pleasure, and they will extract fun out of it. But somehow, somewhere, people realize that effectively what we're doing is we are teaching people to work within constraints and reach a certain objective and get that fulfillment of an objective has been reached, a result has been achieved. And these concepts then transgress the border, and they came to be applied in different domains. Now applied games has become a huge market in itself, and we are looking at the shift where people are saying how we can use these gaming principles, these different methodologies that we use within a game, and train people or make them undergo certain actions which can sort of create that desired result. So for example, we were working with a game design institute in Bangalore, and we were sort of looking at creating this human interaction. It was a human interaction experiment, so we were trying to figure out how can we make this whole process of defining passwords simpler. Because if you look at a typical scenario, there would be a form, and you write a password, then you retype your password, and it will say that, okay, use a lowercase character, use an uppercase character, use a special character. Your previous, like the password could not be same as your previous password. Your password cannot have elements from your name, username, and both the passwords should match. Now this is a simple process. All of us understand it is important, but for normal people, it can be a huge hassle process. They have a tough time, and it's compounded because then they have to remember that complex pattern. I can't write my date of birth and simply be done with it because I would remember my date of birth or my mother's name or something like that. Now, in that experiment, what we tried doing was that instead of showing all those rules, we had a cartoon character next to that form, and the expressions of this cartoon character would change depending on how strong your password is. And when you're not using certain rules, those rules, the cartoon character would sort of have a comic bubble and suggest something that, hey, probably you can try something like this. And this was targeted towards college students, and we saw that there was a huge jump in spike in terms of people who are now more comfortable setting stronger passwords. There is a human problem there. They will still have to remember it, and most of them were trying to remember it by writing it down in some digital notebook or something. That is not easily solvable as of now, I think. But that was an interesting experiment.
Well, that's a very interesting one. I do see some of those sites which show you a frowny or a smiley, but haven't gone on to a cartoon character jumping out and giving you guidance. That will be very interesting. But I think there's a shift again, and Manish, I may come back on this one to you because Kinshuk brought in a very fairly pertinent point. I think passwords and more that we bring our identity online is becoming a challenge because so many passwords which an average person needs to look upon. Is there a way that you are also seeing a trend where identity is going on to a central platform rather than having a multiple federated kind of an identity, and then identity getting linked to individual, and some of them are talking today of biometrics to really come upon to take away the behavioral elements from individuals at this point of time? Is that something what you are hearing, or is this something which you're working upon?
We're definitely hearing it, and yes, we are also working on it. So since today the devices are becoming smarter and biometrics is being integrated into them, but it is still a little, I will say, time away before you actually have biometrics coming in and on my smartphone, and I'm using my biometrics for authenticating myself. The service is out there, it's already there, Aadhaar is already out there for you to consume, but at the same time the devices today have to conform to certain technical specs. So if you go to a bank branch or you go out to any of these agencies who offer these services, they're pretty tacky right now, the devices. You don't have them as sleek as you have your handheld devices as of today. And the ones which are there, which kind of meet both the beauty and the requirement, they're outside the reach of most people. But usually, yes, we are hearing that people want a single identity and a single sign-on, if I may say. And then after that, I should be able to do everything. Which means the existing softwares and operating systems are catering for it on your smart handhelds. It's about maturity as of now. You have the passport on the iOS. You can put in stuff over there. Even before the wallets came in, you had the concept of a passport. Those who are familiar with the Apple stack. So they're putting it there, they're waiting, they're biding their time, and it's going to happen soon.
Okay. So that's an interesting shift, because then we take away the human behavior to that element, and you always get that. I don't know how many of us in the audience have got that human being started from thumbprint before, and we're going back to thumbprint. So that's what technology can do to us. But Kinshuk, coming to you, you brought in a great example where you talked upon how you saw the college students having the shift which was coming upon. And I think since you are into this area where you're developing constantly games, and you do both kind of games, mass targeted games and very focused games, how do you factor in the human behavior while you're doing these gamings? Because you get to, the way you are reaching out, you are touching the behavior of individuals. You have to understand them. Then only you can make something which is so relevant and pertinent to them. And if there are some of those messages which all of us can take back into our enterprises, we can apply that accordingly how we see it back in our lives.
So Atul, I'd like to answer that with an example, which is not from the gaming domain. I hope a lot of us know about John Oliver. He's a stand-up comedian in the US and does a wonderful weekly late-night show. So in one of his episodes, he interviewed Edward Snowden. And in that interview, he wanted to talk about all the surveillance programs and why that is relevant and important, and why the American people should care about it. And Snowden, being Snowden, went into an entire technical explanation of things. And John Oliver said, stop. Nobody's interested in listening what you're saying right now. We need to put it in context. And he used the context of private pictures. And then Snowden and John Oliver walked through the entire process, all the programs, talking about these private pictures that individuals share over their phones. And he had a montage of people in different cities talking about how they felt about these programs. The earlier montage was how they didn't care. They didn't even know who Snowden was. And then suddenly, after this entire conversation, the same people were asked about, hey, do you want the government to look at your private pictures? They were like, hell no. And they're like, this is my stuff, why should the government look at it? So the moment that technical debate was put into context for them, it became relevant and they became concerned. So when we are making games, we might want people to do a lot of things within the game. A simple example, we were working on a game that involved a lot of liquid physics. And we wanted to explain, a lot of things about how liquids would work and how the player should respond to different liquids and how to engage with them. So we simply, after a lot of debate, looking at how, so one part of it is how do you simplify things? And in some time, at some occasions, it becomes oversimplification, might not completely convey the criticality or importance of the things, but the core message should get across. So we looked at how can we look at liquids and tell the player that, hey, this is probably not good for you. And we said, hey, it's a liquid. So if you go into the liquid, you'll soak it. Your clothes will get wet and they'll become heavier. You'll become slippery because you have liquid all over you. So you'll not move properly. And you'll move slowly. And that simple change in behavior of the character told players that, hey, we need to stay away from the liquids. And they stood away from the liquids. So the idea is how do we bring the focus to the critical elements and how do we take the core message across that, hey, this is not good for you.
Oh, that's excellent, Kinshuk. Since you brought in when you talked liquid physics, I thought you're really cracking up something great over there. But the simplicity with which you brought upon, I think that was amazing. And I want to go back on the point which Manish raised upon, and that monsoon fishing exercise which you did. I picked up the statistics which said that 10% click on the link, but 0.03% actually divulge the information. But the pain point for you was that less than 5% actually reported it back. Now, Kinshuk, putting your hat of looking at the human behavior, what would be your suggestion to this entire community? Because I can extrapolate what Mani just talked. This is a problem which is consistent across the entire enterprises at this point of time, where you do so much of awareness, where you bring in so much of elements, you make people realize what they should not be doing. And if they see something like that, they should be reporting that and doesn't works. Right. So, a large part of the population understands we should not be doing and they stop there. They don't come back to a Manish. How do you think we can, looking at the human behavior and some of your gaming experience, can bring upon this, way of reporting? And let me give you my thought, because this is a problem which normally comes to me as a consultant. I'm just trying to get a solution from you. The challenge is what Kinshuk really talked upon initially, saying when you are trying to fill up a form where you have to enter the password, you have to retype and do all those things. It's just the process is so painful for you, and then you have to go all over above. And how can you simplify the process of raising an incident? Technology guys, people like me and others, they get blamed because we make technology systems so complex that you need to put your employee ID, then you need to put your function, then you need to put all those elements so that we can do a segmentation and analysis and so on and so forth. So my solution has been make it as simple as possible. And then the reporting will go up. But Kinshuk, if you have some suggestions over there.
So, there's some bit of the context that I'm not aware of. So maybe this solution might not work. I'll again quote an example where we were able to solve a problem like that. I used to contribute to the Mozilla Foundation, and I was part of the team that handled a lot of student representative programs within the Asian continent. So we wanted these student representatives to be very aware of the entire open web ecosystem and sort of flag websites which are not sticking to standards. That was an activity that we wanted to encourage. And Mozilla had just started with a new program called a platform called the Open Badges platform. So we sort of worked with their team, and we created a gamified system where we created a browser add-on for people to install on their browsers. And every time they would flag a website and say that, hey, this website is not adhering to open web, the student representative would get some points. And these points would eventually convert into an open badges. So they had their own kit in which they would get all these different badges. It's like how the Scouts program works. You get different exploration badge and this badge and that badge. So that sort of worked very well with the students. And they eventually had this entire range of badges. And they was also sort of competing with each other that, hey, I have this badge. This is probably a rarer badge. And we were able to gamify the entire exercise and create that result-oriented, action-driven program. So probably something like that might work in organizations to encourage that reporting behavior so that a better action can be taken.
Oh, that's absolutely great. And I've seen that, Kinshuk, happening in some organizations. People take a lot of pride in having those identified or recognitions which are provided to them. So I'll go back on to Manish. Manish, is there something, because when you were talking also on so many elements, so many channels whereby you reach out to the users, is there a reward mechanisms which exist upon in the bank? And is that what motivates? Because, till now, if you listen to all the ads and the way the FMCG companies would be targeting, the focus is always on what you get add-on. And we as a country and citizens of the country really get excited about the add-on rather than what the core is. So again, that's a behavior. So yes. Are you seeing that trend which can be used upon in security?
So I will say yes and no. Why I say yes is because I showed you the statistics on the security first V3, which was close to 93%, rather 70% for the new version, and combined 93%. One way we achieved that was to incentivize it. So what he gave an example is basically incentivizing it. Call me a little old school, but I personally feel that why do I need to incentivize everything? I mean, it's your organization too. But at the same time, that's how behavior is. So what we do is whenever anybody successfully completes their course, it's a very nice, jazzy, trendy looking certificate which is mailed to them. And they are supposed to take a printout and they can display it on their desk. It shows very clearly their name, it shows what is their score, and a good, well done message that goes in from the CISO to them that, okay, you've done this, you're part of the frontline team. Because I remember in the morning session, I think the lady from Airtel was also mentioning the same thing, that while everything looks nice at a strategic level, at the planning level, when it goes down to execution and right to the person who's facing the music, how much of it do they really comprehend and understand? This is one way of ensuring that. But yes, on the phishniks or the phishing diagnostics, we have to think through.
You have a point, right?
Yeah, so in fact, picking up on what Kinshuk said about the flag. So if you picture in the enterprise, you have an Outlook plugin, which essentially then sends the email or reports directly to the platform, is one aspect. And building on what Manish said, having a hall of fame, and simultaneously for repeat clickers, having a hall of shame.
Yeah.
And picking up on that gamification aspect,
yeah.
You bring in badges, which actually creates a leaderboard on both sides.
Yeah.
Because what you didn't have with the 85% is actually bad behavior. Because ideally you want them to report. This was simulation, but in the real world scenario, if 85% are not reporting, is an issue.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. Yeah, you want to add a point?
I'll just like to add something. When making games, we very deliberately try and avoid negative recognition. Shames, the wall of shame. Because nobody likes to be, embarrassed. And while it can be discouraging and helpful in achieving the objective, in the longer run of things, it creates negative connotations. What we have experienced is that the best way to achieve these complicated outcomes is where we handhold the wall of shamers. Yeah. And maybe instead of calling them the wall of shame, it could be the wall of people who need assistance. Like, not assistance, that's again a negative connotation. Yeah, something like that.
Which is why in the context I said repeat clickers. We're looking at somebody who's done it 6 times repeatedly, needs to basically, I've seen in the UK, for example, I can quote you an example from the UK. Enterprises, what they're doing is essentially people who have repeat clicked beyond 5 times.
Right.
Let's say the campaign's running 18 times or 12
Right.
times.
Right.
Beyond 5 times, they will essentially take privileges away.
Yeah.
They will quarantine them into a separate network.
Yeah.
They will not be allowed on the same network because, those are the guys who are going to put you at risk.
Oh, absolutely.
So the reason from a security perspective, gaming perspective, I take your point on board completely. But from a information security in enterprise, it's essential to point out to people that there is a disincentive.
Yeah.
If you don't understand, some of the fundamental aspects.
Yeah, and before you go, Manish, I think somewhere I was also picking up, I'm assuming no one from HR fraternity in the room, but year-end process, they have this bell curve fitment. Yeah. So, and We're doing away with that. I don't know. The Hall of Shames or the Wall of Shames actually help in getting on that side, and that's. But the other challenge which comes over there is when you start recognizing people go out and saying, I again am an exception on the better side. I'm one of those outliers. So, but Manish, I just pulled out your thought here.
I just wanted to point out, not the Hall of Shame, but there is a repercussion, and that has been built into the system. So that works two ways. So any employee who is found to violate the information security policy, and after the due process, there have been terminations. Yes. And there is a process which is in place. Yeah. There is a process whereby if the course is not completed on time, there is enough chances given. So like you said, repeat clickers. So you have repeat offenders who, despite all the feedback given, all the reminders given, including probably a callback from the HR, because HR has to play their role in this. It's tightly integrated. And even then, if the employees refuse to take the test, well, they probably end up losing a day's pay.
Yeah, and I think those changes are happening. I'll come to you. Those changes are happening at this point of time. I've heard of this quarantine which is happening, because it just happened on its own. Someone has to manually intervene and do upon something at this point of time. So you withdraw the access rights and so on and so forth.
AD goes dead for them.
Yeah. Things like those which are happening. But again, I think I am very clear of a view saying that the workforce which is now coming at this point of time, they are very focused. They come in to do work and they have life outside work as well, right? When you start putting some hard measures onto them, how motivating it is for them, and because we're talking of human behavior today, you just have to balance this out. Because again, some of the studies have very clearly showcased that it's the pre-millennium generation which is more resilient to some of those, and the post-millennium generation is actually not. And that's where the conflict starts emerging, where HR or the top leadership of the organization wants you to be the employer of choice. But once you have having those kind of measures, you really don't get to become employer of choice. So those are the conflicts which we need to deal upon with. There was some question right at the end of there. Yeah. You need a mic. Can we get a mic across to the lady? Yeah. Preeti, can you help?
Yeah, hi. Your presentation was something I was particularly looking for because I don't come from the technical background. I'm from psychology background. So of course it was of great interest for me how you've spoken about patching people behavior. And when you spoke about the vulnerable group, because of course people are vulnerable when it comes to security from the cyber perspective specifically. However, if we speak from psychology perspective, when we say vulnerable people, we identify certain groups of people. It may be the elderly people. It may be people who have certain kind of personality traits which can be identified as deviant. So are there any specific practices or actions that are taken for that kind of vulnerable group of people? Say, for instance, if you speak of elderly group, someone who's crossed the age of 70, certainly they will have a deteriorated memory. So it will be difficult for them to then remember longer passwords, or if they have multiple accounts. So are there any specific mechanisms designed to attend to that kind of vulnerable group as well?
Yes, there are. And I wouldn't say that we would be, giving them any leeway in terms of the passwords. That's the standard policy. But in terms of what they can do if they are getting into net banking, there are these risk rules which are written. So there is an engine which constantly monitors every single transaction that you do. So those of you who are familiar, there is a concept of step-up authentication which happens. The moment you want to do a third-party transfer, the moment you want to pay online, there are additional factors of authentication which kick in, right? For this group of people, specifically the, I would say, senior citizens, and probably people who are from rural geographies who are wanting to do this, the risk engine throws out alerts that, okay, a person from a rural background who's never got into net banking suddenly wants to do net banking. That's an alert which is picked up and acted upon. There are some hard rules written for certain categories whereby they cannot transact above X amount per day, per month, per week. And if there are patterns out there, they get picked out, and then the risk team analyzes them, and then there's a whole process that goes through it. So it's, on the face of it, you're transparent to it. You won't even know that's happening. But every single transaction which is happening is being monitored, and wherever there is an alert that gets thrown up, every single alert is acted upon.
I think that sums up very well, Manish, what you brought in a perspective, because I think it's an outside-in question again, bringing upon. One last element which I wanted, and then we can furthermore open up for any questions if there are any. The enterprises, the pace at which we are growing, while we talked a lot about employees, there are a lot of partners who work with us, third parties, and all of them are end of day humans. And while you can do a lot of things with your employees, your HR also is monitoring them, and you have ways of doing the trainings and nudging them constantly. How do you really look upon this element to bring upon an add-on threat to organizations like yourself? And do you see that there is a need for the service provider community, which is around us, all of us, to also step up, to bring in that kind of a behavioral shift in the employees which they're providing upon as service providers?
Yes,
too?
and I think that will be a favorite topic for Samir as well, because this year that has been his focus area, that we need to strengthen our third-party risk management. And you've very correctly brought out that while we may want to, build high walls by the best technology, I wouldn't want the human aspect, not the employee, but maybe the third-party human aspect to be a weak link. Now, we have various scenarios. So to address that, we kind of do scenarios. So you have a scenario where somebody's sitting on site. You have a scenario somebody sitting off site. You have a scenario where an entire business process has been outsourced. You have a scenario where there's only data crunching which is happening and then it's coming back to you. So for each scenario, now you have got certain controls wherein you have preventive controls, you have detective controls in place. People who are sitting on site, it's easier than the ones who are off site. While I have a legal agreement and you have the clauses which we specifically have asked to be put in, that you shall, to be very exact, it says that you shall execute the same level of controls to protect the bank's data as you would for your own. That's under the confidentiality clause. But then that's legal, that's paper, that's fine print. The way is that the same engagement, we can send out mailers. Again, it's about engagement. So what we've done this year is, so far 2 have been conducted, and we are targeting for 2 more, where we've segmented the third-party partner community into being either service providers, what kind of data is going to them, how critical are they, and there is an operational risk team in the bank which kind of flags down that these particular third parties are material in nature, because if something goes wrong with them, it's going to directly impact the bank. Then you have non-material third parties. For each case, you have a different way of addressing it, but then the effort is an ongoing process.
I think, in an increasingly connected world, while there is a game which is going out, which is a man versus machine, but I think we still some time away where machine really will overtake man. Though I know someone in our firm itself who's very clearly proponent of machine taking over man. Until that happens, the behavior will play an important role, and this behavior will be the key, in addition to all the technology and processes which we bring upon, to make sure our enterprises, our data, and all the assets are secured upon from cyber threats which we have. The game which I was talking upon, that's playing out in the cyber gaming zone. So if any one of you have not seen it, you could go out and see over there. I think it was very interesting discussion to have upon, and at this moment I'll open up for further more questions if there are any from the group over here. There's one question there. Can we get a microphone there, please?
Hi, this is Abhishek, and my questions to Kinshuk around the gaming industry. So with a lot of negative criticism around the gaming industry that malwares and virus spreads with games, and on mobile devices if you install something from the gaming side. So being part of a gaming industry, how you really deal with these kind of situations, and how you embolden trust in users and customers?
So Abhishek, there are 2 parts to your question. One is that a lot of malware and viruses are being shared through games on mobile devices and all. Basically, the answer has 2 parts. First of all, at the end of the day, the game is an app. It's a piece of software. Like any other piece of software, you should always get your software from sources you can trust. If there's a random developer on the Play Store, App Store is still much secure there, but on the Play Store or a third-party store, and you just download it without any confirmation of whether it is a reliable source or not, it's going to be like nobody can help you out there. Games can't help there. But the reason that gets associated with the gaming industry a lot is because games are popular and people play games, and which is also why they're being used as these carriers of malware and viruses. They look like a game, they're not a game. That's the first part. The second part is that games, because they're popular and people want to play games, they would pirate a lot of games as well. And when you're pirating games, you are going to questionable websites, downloading stuff which you think is probably a crack or something for the game, could be carrying other stuff as well. So if you follow basic principles of getting your content, you would be safe. There would be not a problem. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, just to add upon, and I'll come to both of you. This is a very common question which comes across to me, saying that why are there so many viruses and malwares which are on Windows and not so much on the Unix systems, right? The answer is Windows was popular. That's the reason why people wanted to attack that. Yeah, you can get into technical details around it, but that's where the games are popular. So they just become carriers. Sorry.
All right. So Manish, one quick question. What are the key metrics that you're looking at? So open, click, and action, I would say, is a set of metrics. What are the other key metrics, top of your mind, that you would say we've moved the security awareness now beyond a certain point? Any other key metrics that audience should?
So right now, like I said, open click is one, what we are seeing. The other one is the compliance to people who are completing the course and what is their score. Barring these two, as of now, we are still developing certain measures, quantifiable measures. So the channels that I showed you in my slide, all of them are right there, correct? There are technologies which have now coming in, whereby I can come to know the behavior of a user on every single page that they are visiting, what they are clicking, how they are going about it. Using that behavior pattern, we are yet to develop metrics whereby I can probably reach out to an individual and say, you behaved in this manner. You shouldn't have done it like this. So, I mean, at the cost of not going back to these sessions which have been happening since last 2 days, at the end of the day, it's about correlating the information. The data might be there with me.
Correct.
It's about correlating it into tangible points, data points, getting the information out of it, and then turning it into something that a decision can be taken upon. But other than the awareness metrics, we have a whole stack of metrics that we do every month with the senior management, which brings out very clearly what are the patterns on the technical front in terms of the USB sticks, the antiviruses, and stuff like that. But on the awareness, right now we are having the compliance to this particular training program and the fitness diagnostic survey. Primarily these two is what we use right now.
All right, great. Thank you.
So if I can just add what Manish just mentioned, we're seeing a trend where industry is really looking and moving forward, because one of the solutions which was talked a lot, and again I'm going back onto technology, was DLP, where there was a data leakage prevention. But every technology has its own nuances and challenges around it. Data leakage continues. And I think that's where organizations are now realizing, saying that how can you monitor the behavior of the users when the data leak alerts are coming upon? And that's one of the areas where enterprises are started moving forward at this moment. Yeah, so that's where one of the elements is coming. Matrix may not have emerged at this point of time, but it's more monitoring the behavior and then taking action, which in past was not there, because in past it was like you have a magic solution over there, but you realize that human behavior obviously brings in dynamics around it. And this, sorry, go ahead.
So that's one metric we've been working on. So we have the solution, we have the information, and the examples which I was giving you on termination, some of them have emerged because of the DLP. But turning it into a metric to be an indicator of the behavior, I think that's a little distance away.
Yeah, a bit ahead of time. We have one last question there, then we'll close.
One quick question.
The last question.
Yeah, we all know that there are so many tools available to find out the malware and other things. Let's say suppose I'm downloading some kind of files, right? I can identify whether there's a macro available or not in that file. So is there any similar kind of tool is available which can be used to find out whether any internal coding is there in game which is going to communicate with the CNC center or some kind of a malware IP addresses or somewhere?
You want to answer that, Kinshuk?
So if I understood the question correctly, the question is whether are there tools that can, like when you're downloading a game, are there tools that can look at the game and check the internal codings and see whether they're like infected or not?
That's correct.
Or monitor the network traffic which it is generating.
So I wouldn't be the right person to like answer that because it touches more upon cybersecurity expertise.
Yeah. So let me just help Kinshuk over there. It's very simple. You can obviously monitor something, but you need to have a solution to monitor it. And the brutal answer is, if you look across the majority of the population that we have in the country, which uses smartphone, which tends to be an Android phone, there are no basic security softwares which are deployed over there. So unless you put those elements could not be stopped upon.
I'll just like to add a few things as well, that a game at the end of the day is a software, and whatever detection or monitoring you can do with a software, you can do with a game. Games are no different. What makes them different is that they are interactive pieces of entertainment which are not trying to solve a specific problem for you. They are there to help you, to entertain you. But that's not just what games are. Games are also a set of tools, methodologies, and principles that you can take from this interactive medium and apply to pretty much any scenario and make it more engaging, make it more result-oriented, and more functional.
Just to add to what Atul said, specifically if you're on a desktop or a laptop, if you have an endpoint security tool which you have installed, while within the corporate environment or the company's environment, games are not allowed. So that way we're pretty okay. We may have an exception here and there if somebody does a bypass, but other than that, for individuals at home, if you're using computing devices or handheld devices, make sure you have some kind of endpoint security tool which is installed. And it usually auto configures itself. So if there is any callback happening or any malicious activity happening, it will prompt you.
No, we can. We are running late, right? I think we have a short of time, so we can discuss offline.
Sure.
But that's the second stage. I'm talking about the first stage. So we'll discuss offline.
Thank you. Thank you, panel members. Thank you.